It is great to see you. I am looking so forward to our family education weekend coming up here right around the corner, May 19th, 20th, and 21st. And I wanted to take some time today just to talk to a good friend of mine about parenting with hemophilia. And I think we've got a lot of good things to talk to you about. But before I do that, I want to just tell you, if you have not heard yet, we are doing something called Family Education Weekend. It's coming up in just a little bit, and we want you to be a part of it. It's an online event, and it's an opportunity for you to jump into some sessions and learn more about bleeding disorders, learn more about the opportunity to connect with community members who are living with a bleeding disorder. And it is a wonderful time. People from all over the United States will be a part of this event. It's a great time to jump in. And maybe you can't come to all the sessions, but just sign up, look what's on the schedule, see if you can find one session that you can participate in. I think you have a lot of fun. We're doing a lot of great fun things as well, such as giveaways and prizes with gift cards in every session. We're even doing a grand prize each and every day. So if you could participate in a couple of sessions, 2 or 3 or more, you actually have be entered into a drawing for some big prizes. Like we have some Oculus Quest goggles. I think that we're doing some free VR headsets for the family. We're doing a $500 gift card and some other fun things. So there's a lot of great things. You can get on our website right now at hope-charities.org to sign up for the event. And it is going to be a blast. It's a free event. A lot of great things going to be going on. You're going to enjoy it. And you can always ask us any questions that you have at events at hope-charities.org to talk about anything that you may have questions about related to the event. But today I wanted to invite my good friend Kate Dulak to join me to talk a little bit about her background of living with hemophilia and specifically parenting a child with hemophilia. So Kate, I want to see if I can get you in here. It is great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today to be a part of this interview for our podcast for Family Education Weekend.
Well, thank you for having me, Jonathan. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it is great to see you as well. And man, it is science and technology are two of my favorite things. And it is amazing that we can be thousands of miles apart and still be able to connect like this and to be able to have a great conversation today. So I appreciate you carving out time for this and looking forward to a great time. But tell people who might not know you and who haven't had a chance to meet you before a little bit about where you're from and what you do for a living, as well as how you're impacted by hemophilia. We'll start there.
Well, hi. I am Kate Dulak. I am a mother of one young son who is now 11 years old. His name is Joseph, who is affected with hemophilia. Hemophilia A, he's a moderate at 1%. I am the daughter of a hemophiliac. I am a carrier, symptomatic carrier, whatever we want to call it now. Right now, I'm in my classroom. I'm a special education teacher from New Jersey. And so happy to be here to chit chat and answer any questions.
Yeah, that is so great. Well, we love New Jersey folks, even though they sometimes get a bad rap, but they're kind of like people from the South. People from the South, like me, we get a bad rap too. So different kind of way. But I think that that people will get to love you the more they get to know you, like we have. So you're an expert in really in the fields on a professional level. You're an expert on understanding people that deal with all types of learning disabilities, especially people who are on the spectrum. And so maybe talk just briefly about that just for a minute, just so people understand your background, and then we'll dive into your parenting tips, because I think you got some great ideas about that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I have been a special education teacher for about 18 years. I've been in the field of special education for 21. This was a part-time job, or not a part-time job, sorry, a blip between jobs. They needed people. I had a subcert and I was good to go, and fell in love, was encouraged to go back and get my master's in special education to become a teacher. And so I did. And I have not left this building, this area, this school since. So
Wow.
I'm a lifer. Right now in my classroom, I am a self-contained special education middle school, high school teacher. So every year it can change. We are a self-contained school or a private school, and I love it. I love my kids. It's a challenge. Most of our students are on the autism spectrum or have other developmental disabilities. Every day is eventful. Every day is wonderful. Every day I wake up and can't wait to see my kids. And I think that working here and understanding other family struggles and helping them through their hard times, helping them through their fabulous, wonderful events that have happened in their life, has really helped me in parenthood, being the mother that I am, because
Mm,
I didn't have kids first before I became a teacher. I was a teacher first, and so I had hundreds of kids before I even had my own, and children with all different aspects of life, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different nationalities, but just learning from all those families has really helped me with the challenges of being a hemophilia mom. Even though,
wow.
they're not medical challenges I deal with at school, it still has definitely carried over.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the exposure to I've had been involved with several schools similar to the one that you're involved with, as well as lots of friends that have been involved in working with children with disabilities, and it is just amazing what you can learn, but also, man, the love that you have for these people that are going through all kinds of different challenges. And I know for me, at least, I found that it has both made me probably more compassionate
Mhm.
to people who have other disabilities because of the challenges that I've been through, but it also has made me gosh, I don't know, sometimes thankful for how, you sometimes
Yeah,
you feel like you've got it bad until you see some of the other things that a lot of other people have to navigate. And so, I just, man, I'm so inspired by what you do, because it
thank
takes a
you.
lot of courage and energy and passion and compassion and endurance to be able to do what you do. So thank you so much for what you do. It's a meaningful, impactful thing that you give yourself to. That's inspiring.
Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure. If you've
Yeah.
ever, worked with these families, you'll know that it's my pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Well, I want to back up just a little bit, because this is one of those things that you can't. I always say you can only give what you have received, right? And so I think that one of the things about great parenting is that sometimes you start with where you came from, right? And so you have a great heritage, and in having a father that actually had hemophilia as well, and so he had his own sets of challenges and everything. And so, talk to me a little bit about where life started with you in terms of being introduced to living with someone with a bleeding disorder. Is really your relationship with your dad first, and then finding out that you had exposure, and then finding out your son had, and all of the different journey that you had. Walk us through that a little bit about growing up with, and then experiencing having your own son later.
Sure. So as a younger kid, you're not really aware of what your parents go through on the daily. Um, and then when you become a parent, you're like, wow, I should have, maybe been a little nicer to my mom and dad, because I knew they were going through stuff I didn't even know was happening. So
Wow.
I always knew that my father had something, a bleeding disorder. My grandmother was a bruiser, a bleeder, and my father had a bleeding disorder. But I didn't really know what was going on until I was, middle school, high school. In elementary school, I got my tonsils out and I had to be tested. So they took me, so I knew that something was going on in our family that I had received from my father's. And that I could bleed for a very long time. That's basically how they explained it to, fifth grade me. And so I was like, okay. And I got tested. I got my tonsils out and I hemorrhaged. And so went on that journey. That was scary. That was very traumatic. Things were not the same as they are now. And I wasn't a hemophiliac. I was just a carrier. So this wasn't because of that. I was hospitalized for 3 days and I received DDAVP. Um, and then I was released and I was fine. We all get through it. But that was really where things kind of like switched and it became more real.
Mm,
And then I can remember, little procedures or whatever my father having. I always remember my dad like cracking his forehead, gardening, or like going into the attic and it just bleeding for weeks. The band-aid, and being like, just why won't it stop? Just make it stop. But that was normal. And I didn't
hmm.
really understand that other parents' heads didn't bleed like that. Like it's not everybody's dad does that. Um, and then as I got older, if I sprained my ankle, I always reacted differently than everyone else, but I was still a carrier. It was not, I'm not a bleeder, it's fine. And then as I became an adult and I had to take on my own health, that's when I really started. Like when I went to college, I had to be aware because I had to be able to tell somebody if something happened to me, like, hey, there really is no plan in place, but I have this thing. So, like I used to say to I can remember like saying to my roommates, like, guys, I have something called hemophilia. I'm a carrier. So like if something bad ever happens to me, just tell them that. You don't
Right.
just tell them that. Someone will know what you're
Right.
talking about, you know?
Right.
Um, and then as I became an adult, I saw the wear and tear on my father's body that this disease has, that this has basically put him through. You know,
Right.
he had a very physical job. He was a building inspector, so going onto work sites, spraining his ankles constantly. Like when you have a trigger ankle, you that's the one you're always twisting it, so it becomes your trigger ankle. Well, over years of not treating because it was a different time, he had to have his ankle fused. And that was about probably like 2005, 2006. And that's when it really became like, well, why wasn't dad treating? If this is a thing, like you can get medicine brought to your house, then why haven't we been doing this? And
Right.
it's just, it wasn't really a thing,
Right.
unless you were severe. For those who were, moderate, it just was, well, if you get hurt, then you have
Right.
this medicine. It's not just, oh, I twisted my ankle, let me give it to me.
Right.
Um,
Well, and
yeah,
it's true that this is one of the reasons why we have so many people that were classified as moderate, that now live as if they're severe because they have so much joint damage from not being treated. So it's interesting that you saw your dad actually go through that degradation process.
yeah, and it was different because my uncle was, I think they were both moderate. My uncle has since passed, but they were both moderate, but my uncle bled like a severe. So he did have
Mm,
factor in his refrigerator because he was treating. He had, those kinds of things. So there was a
wow.
difference. I guess my father, they probably knew it because my uncle bled like a severe and wasn't a thing for us.
Right.
Um, and also I think it's the individual choice as well, whether you're gonna make
Right.
the decision to be proactive or not.
Right.
Which I have also seen change with him over the years. And I think his grandson is what really there seemed to be a rotation when my son was born. You know,
Wow.
yeah,
So
because he's receiving treatment that my father never did, and that's a blessing. My
yes.
uncle and my father would always say that, take advantage of it. We grew up without having this, and look at what's happened. Always take
Yeah.
advantage of it.
Yeah, that's so important. So tell us about that a little bit. At some point you get pregnant and then you
Mhm.
find out that you're having a boy. And so did that immediately, like, you knew you had your own issues with the tonsils and the different things going on? Like I mean, you had to worry about that a little bit. Like, are you going to have a son with hemophilia? What does that look like? Tell me about that. Like, how did you go about that?
So when we got pregnant, we weren't trying, but when we got pregnant, we had been married. We had known each other for about 10 years, and we had been married for
Wow.
about 7.
Wow.
So he knew family history. It was of no surprise. And we just said, well, if the baby has hemophilia, the baby has hemophilia. Like, what are you gonna do
Yeah.
about it, right?
Yeah.
And yes, of course, we were worried, and I was worried, but I wasn't as worried as maybe a parent who finds out at birth or shortly after birth that their child has this, because I had grown up with it. I saw that even though things had happened to my father and my uncle, they were still here. They were living full and healthy lives. Um,
Right.
you know, so it was not. There wasn't that dread.
That's
Which
good.
is a blessing. It was a blessing.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
worried. Every parent worries about when you're pregnant, and when that's just normal. You're going to worry: is the child's going to be born healthy? All five fingers on each hand, that kind of a thing. Um, but the hemophilia really wasn't. We did go to a genetic counselor, even though there really was no point. We knew I had hemophilia. I knew it was like 50-50. I basically probably could have told the geneticist, exactly, here's my understanding. This is exactly what you know too. But we did it just to make sure that we covered all our bases. And when Joy was born, we just had him tested. I didn't do an amniocentesis. I didn't want to put him at risk or myself at risk. No judgment at all, but I just figured we don't know. And if he is a hemophiliac, it could cause bleeding, and it could cause bleeding with myself as well. So we tested after birth, and we found out within like 2 weeks that he was indeed a hemophiliac. Um,
Wow.
and there's the grief. I did have the grief. I did cry. I think it was more of a, okay, it's real kind of a thing. Where do we go?
Mhm.
Not a woe is me or woe is Joey. It was more just like, okay, this means work. but it's going to be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Wow. That's so amazing. You hear a lot of people say, I mean, there's different, you kind of mentioned earlier, it comes down to the personal choice of what to do with the information once you have it, and treating and all of those things. And I think this is the same, to each his own, and don't judge anybody for the way that they feel. But
Right.
I always tell my kids, because I have 4 kids, 2 daughters, and both of them are affected. And so, one of the things that I say to them all the time, I'm like, look, if, some people know, and they don't want to have, they don't want to take the risk of having a son, whatever. And I can empathize with that feeling, because I've, can empathize with that for sure. I was a spontaneous mutation, so it's kind of like nobody knew until it happened,
Right.
but it's like, if then what, but I always say, man, I tell my girls this, I'm like, life can be beautiful. Matter of fact, life is beautiful. Even if you have challenges, you're going to have challenges. The one thing that's kind of, I mean, not to say that it's not to overlook the hardship, but one thing that's nice about hemophilia is, at least, what do they say? The saying, this is like the devil that you know versus the devil you don't. There's
Yeah.
an aspect of it is like, at least the challenges that you're going to be facing, and you can preempt some of the damage and some of the joints.
Right.
Your son Joey's not going to have the same problems that your dad had, because there's advancements in medication, but there's also this thing of like, hey, let's adhere to maybe what the treatment regimen should be earlier than maybe the other generation didn't even have that choice. So
Right.
I think that there's something to be said for, like, yeah, there is a grieving place. Yeah, there is a place to be able to say, man, it's work. It's going to take something, but man, just the courage it takes to accept that and say, you know what, life can still be beautiful. You saw your dad and your uncle and others go through this and go, you know what, it's still had a beautiful life, and it's still worth living, even though there's challenges to be met. So, man, that's
Absolutely.
that's a beautiful way to say all that. I love that. That's so good. Well, so tell me a little bit about how is Joey doing now, and of course, you guys have experienced that, and then you've had a surgery recently that I think that's been impactful too. So tell me a little bit about what does life look like now as you're learning to go along this bleeding disorder journey with your own family.
So we've been really fortunate with Joey. Joey had when he was little, between the ages of 1 and 2, maybe 3, with the toddler phase. We had a bunch of bumps and bruises. We call it, he has a little devil's horn, because every time, that must have been the heavy part of his head. His brain was bigger on that side. So when he would fall, he would hit the one side all the time. So he's got his little devil's horn. So he did have, we treated him, but it was injuries. It was the crawling. It was the falling. It was the toddlering
Yeah,
phase. And then
yeah,
between then and about 6 years old, we were, I mean, knock on wood, very fortunate. He needed very few treatments of factor, very few visits to the emergency room. We weren't on any sort of prophylaxis, nothing. It was just on demand, because he seemed to be bleeding like a mild, even though he was
okay,
moderate. So we were very
yeah,
fortunate. Um, we're not sure what happened, but around 6, he got a hip bleed. And it wasn't quite clear that it was a hip bleed for almost a week and a half, on the part of the emergency room, unfortunately, and the miscommunications, and how things go.
yeah,
No matter how much you advocate, sometimes it just goes in one ear and out the other. So
right,
when we finally got treatment, he was hospitalized for 7 days, factor twice a day, and then down to once a day, PT, everything. And that was a really difficult time. And
mm,
at that point, after that, we looked at going prophylaxis. Sorry, I have a hard time saying that word sometimes. Plus, it didn't work today, so my brain is a little mush. And that's when we started on his journey. We were doing once a week. He is not a fan of IVs, as nobody is, but he's not a fan of home IVs, and
yeah,
so that was difficult.
yeah,
Um, but that's about the time that a new drug came on the market that we wouldn't have to do those situations with. And it could be his prophylactic. So we were able to switch medications at about 10. And since then, we've been bleed free. And so
that's
we have
awesome.
not had to do any treatments, injuries and all. We've been very
Wow,
lucky that it haven't been, serious injuries. Done
that's
very
incredible.
well. He's healthy. He's growing. I'm going to middle school orientation tonight for him, so that's a little scary. You
Wow.
know, but he's his own advocate too. Like, he knows. He tells, like, all his friends know. He tells
Wow.
them, there's a story about they were on the playground and some girl didn't like the group of boys, so she came over and she kicked Joey because, boys and girls, and his friends
Right.
all stood up and they're like, "Hey, he's a bleeder. You can't do that to him," and so, and I
That's
told him that's great
awesome.
because he's empowered himself. He told his friends and his friends are looking out for him,
Yeah.
and he's living the typical, 11-year-old life. He's going down to the park every day after school with his friends on his bike. And, he's going, so we don't restrict him. He doesn't restrict himself, you
That's
know?
so good.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
good. Well, so that brings me to my next question. That's a good. Okay, so let's talk about parenting. Just there's a lot of parents watching right now, and they're thinking, "Man, I mean, the broad array of parenting, uh, both requirements and skills and choices that you have to engage as a parent, is fascinating to me. But so there's a lot of choices to be made as a parent. But I think all parents have to decide, like, are we going to bubble wrap our kids? Well, when you have a bleeding disorder, like the temptation to be the helicopter parent or whatever is so much higher, right? I mean, I do it,
Mhm.
and I don't even want to do it. It's like by
Mhm.
accident. I should know better, but it sounds like that you're an incredibly empowering parent, and so let's talk about that for just a minute. Let's drill down into that. How is it that what are some of the things that you've been able to do to be able to empower Joey to be able to speak up for himself and make that not a shameful thing for him to talk about, but to make that, was it ever a time where you felt like that you needed to inspire him, encourage him, or give him those tools, or did he do that on his own?
That was, uh, I think, a little bit of both. So
Yeah.
after his hip bleed, um, we had to basically say, you need to tell us, like, you need to tell us, you need to tell your teachers, you need to tell your friends if something's wrong, because we're kind of believe that he had been in pain and having issues for a little bit of time before then. You don't just typically get a bleed and it's full blown in
Right.
the hospital in one day. I mean, it's possible,
Right.
but
Of course. Right.
and I think at about that's around the time, like 6 and 7, you're kind of like finding yourself, you need to impress people. And so I think that he just didn't want to say anything or whatever it was. So after that situation, I actually took him to counseling, to therapy, and had him talk to someone who wasn't us
Excellent.
and who wasn't even familiar with hemophilia. It was just a therapist, a kid's
Wow.
therapist. And, like, how can we stand up for ourselves? How can we help ourselves? How can we help others? Like, just the whole typical child therapy. And he wasn't super happy about going to it. But yeah, I mean, as probably none of us would be if your mom's dragging you to talk to some stranger. But I really felt that it was very important that he talked to somebody who wasn't mom going, well, you need to tell your friends. Well, because from me, I can say, I love you, you're special, and everyone loves you. You just whatever, but that's mommy and that's grandma and that's whoever. For someone else to say, it's okay for you to say, I don't want to do that. That's going to hurt my body. Or, hey, I just need to slow down, guys. But I don't want you to make fun of me because I'm slow. It's just because my ankle hurts, because I heard it or whatever. So I think that was the first step to us empowering him. Like, it's had
Right.
to start with us. And then he basically, I think without even him knowing it, because he wants to be a part of things. So he'll say, I want to play baseball, guys, but can I stand over here so that I don't have to run up the hill or jump up the curb because whatever. Yeah, like, so it
Yeah.
took whatever it took to get there. I'm not quite sure what clicked, but we just needed to make sure that he could stand up for himself and feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, like helping them have the conversation and kind of pulling that out of them sometimes is it's a million little conversations. It's maybe not necessarily just one thing, but I
Right.
think I know for me at least with parenting my kids that I have found that really helping to tear down the wall of that apprehension for them to speak up when they need to giving them the space and the
Mhm.
ability and to be empowered to speak up, to say what they need when they need it is a huge part of I think having kids that are able to communicate and articulate what they need when they need it, right?
Yep. No, yeah, and that's really what we want for our kids. We want our kids to be able to stand up for themselves, advocate for themselves,
Right.
bleeding disorder or not, you want your
Right.
kids to be able to be their own person, not
That's right.
want them to be their own person that they're comfortable
That's
with.
so true. That's so true, and not always easy. I mean, I've got,
Mm,
we talked about this before. I've got 4 kids, and so I've got 4 very different personality types in my home. I've got my firstborn is outgoing and colorful, and she's the sunshine, and everything's just a party, and she wants to express herself, right? But then I've got my next daughter down. She's she's the middle child. I have a son in between, but my next daughter, she's the introvert and doesn't want to say anything. And it's like we have to it's like pulling teeth to try to get her to say anything what she needs, and but I think, if I could encourage anybody to be able to, to help their kids to be able to communicate what their needs are, I think it would be to say just to be lean into your kids' personalities, but then
mhm,
also lean into like helping them find those tipping points where they're triggers where they can actually to positively be able to communicate what it is they need. And like my youngest, for example, he's so expressive. He takes after me. Everything's a but he kind of embellishes on his feelings sometimes about pain or things. Stub his toe and it's like my leg is broken, and you're like, okay, I just have to, as a parent, I have to get used to like, okay, that's his response, and it's not always like, okay, what's wrong, what's going
right.
on. I don't have to
Yeah.
be on top of it. But if my middle daughter says, like, oh my, I can watch her, she didn't even have to say anything, I can watch her kind of limping through the living room or giving to her leg a little bit. I'm like, okay, I need to go to her and help her articulate, because
What's
she's
going on?
almost never going to tell me. So knowing those dynamics of your kids is really, really important, but then helping them come from the place that they are to the place that they need to be, I think is equally as important as a parent, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, obviously you've done an incredible job with Joey, and he's
Thank you.
very articulate and very good at being able to communicate about what his needs are. I love to hear that he's already advocating for himself in his own, classroom, with his classmates and so on. I've told people this all the time, that probably the number one best way to learn how to advocate for yourself is by telling people who don't have hemophilia about your hemophilia. And sometimes
Mhm.
I'm all about community. I think it's very important. Obviously, give a lot of time to an effort to helping people build their own sense of support system. But I do think part of that equation, the best way to develop an elevator speech is to get in a lot of elevators and with a lot of strangers. So you get out there and you learn how to tell your story is really, really good. And so, man, thank you for doing what you've done already with him, and for inspiring us today to talk about this, because I think there's a lot of people that are watching this and thinking, man, maybe I should encourage my kids to talk more about their bleeding disorder, even if it starts in the home, and maybe cross that barrier to outside the home, right?
Yeah. I mean, we all have our challenges, like some kids are self-infusing by 6, some kids are self-advocating by, 11. It's just
Right.
what it is. Like, if I asked Joey to self-infuse, he would be a puddle on the floor. But it's very easy for him to say, listen, I probably can't do that. But can we do this instead? So,
Right.
everybody's battling some sort of battle. It's just how we can encourage them along.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, you can never underestimate the value of the helper
Mhm.
and the caregiver, right? It's that how, and I think that's what parenting is all about. It's all about leadership. It's all about the ability to be able to look at your child and be able to help them get to the next phase, to carry that torch on a little bit further than where you could, where you started from. And you're obviously doing that with Joey, and it's really inspiring. I'll just,
Thank you.
throw this out there to you. Is there any tips that you would, before we leave, that we haven't talked about, that maybe you would like to encourage anybody who's watching this or listening to this, to for them to be able to, if they're struggling with like how to get their kids to communicate and communicate effectively, and even maybe potentially stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves. Anything you'd say to a parent that might be struggling with how to help their child with that?
Um, a lot of the things that I do in my classroom carry over into my life, and I don't even think about it. Funny story: when Joey was born, John kind of looked at him and was like, I think I was like, John, tip his head up, or, get away from the window. It's cold. And he's like, sorry, babe, your mom's a special ed teacher. And so like, you're already learning as, you're sitting here basically like you're in big trouble, um, so,
That's
um,
awesome.
when I'm trying to when in my classroom when we're trying to help a kid communicate, because children on the autism spectrum disorder sometimes have difficulty communicating. um, it's the same thing with neurotypical kids. you know um, Talk about it in a story. Well, when Miss Kate or when mommy is feeling sad, she goes to daddy and she tells him whatever. Or, when mommy's friend wants to do this and she doesn't want to, she says, well, I don't want to do that because I might get hurt, but can we do this instead? And that's kind of how I really encouraged Joey, I think. And, when he got older, it was the therapy, because that was, a specific instance where he had been injured and he was feeling very upset about what happened and all that. And that did help him come out of his shell and move forward. But even before then, when he was little, there's a lot of resources out there. I don't know what the series of books is, but the little series of hemophilia board books for when they're little, it's like Tommy has a bleeding disorder, Tommy
Yeah.
has to use a needle, those kinds of things. As silly and ridiculous as that stuff seems, like, those are stepping stones to communication, because you're teaching them how Tommy did, or
Yeah.
whatever. And just listening. Or I
Mhm.
I don't, and this is in my family, this works, telling my fears too. So
Mhm.
when Joey wanted to play soccer, I said, you can play soccer this year. And we did. And we enrolled him. And he played soccer and he liked it. So when it was over, he kind of started later than the other kids. So it wasn't really Pee Wee soccer. It was almost to the point where you like start heading the ball and like checking and stuff. So I was like,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, buddy, but I don't think that next year that you can play soccer. Well, why not?
Mhm.
Well, because part of the thing you have to do is it's very rough. And you have to hit the ball with your head and like, whatever, and people bump into each other and they trip each other. And that makes mommy very worried because you could get very hurt. Now,
Mhm.
um, not, oh my God, you're gonna get hurt. Like, you can't do it. That makes me a little nervous. We're gonna have to talk about how we can go about you doing this. It's not a
Mhm.
no. It's more of a like, mommy's a little nervous. We have to talk about this. So then, when Joey has a thing, or when your kid has something that they're going through, you could be like, look, remember when mommy was nervous and we talked about it. So you're nervous, or you're excited, or you're sad, or you're angry, like, let's talk about it. Let's
Wow.
um I'm very outgoing, I'm very much an extrovert, but Joey isn't. But that
Mm.
definitely has impacted the way he communicates, and the way, and that's how I seem to help him, like, pull from that, what I know in my background from my classroom, to help him from when he was little. You start when they're little, they don't know, you're reading a book. What's the
Right.
difference between No David and reading Tommy has hemophilia? Really nothing. It's
Right.
you just start little, and then it's reinforced throughout the years. And then if you set the example, I have to really, really consciously set the example, because I'm more of the whatever, it's fine. Like, I'm very sarcastic. I'm very, but so with him, I always have to be very much like, okay, this is the intention, set the intention, and purpose. Everything has to be purposeful.
That's so important. It's
I hope that
amazing
makes
to me,
sense.
just yeah, I mean, the amount of focus on healthy communication within the family unit, I think, is the beginning of the building blocks to help people to be able to know how, kids especially, to learn how to be able to communicate outside of that. So everything you're doing is either giving them tools, or it's enabling them to do something that maybe isn't helpful. So, there's this brilliant thing of what you're doing that's just helping them to be able to be able you're sharing how to help them navigate the emotions of what you're going through, to help them, and so that you're building a sympathetic and empathetic bridge that's empowering your kids to really be able to communicate where they're at, and maybe hopefully give them some reason for understanding your pause. And I love what you said about, it's not a no necessarily, maybe it's a not now, or maybe it's a, we got to figure out how we can do this, not just shutting it down and saying no. And I think, man, there's so much we could talk for hours about just that one thing, because empowering your kids is super, super important. But when you've got this physical hurdle that brings a lot of worry to you as a patient, like I think it's okay to tell your kids, like, hey, I'm struggling, like as your parent, like I'm a little, not displacing the burden of that struggle on them, but just letting them see a glimpse into your thought process, so that maybe that process is what you're instilling into them too, to where later on in life maybe they start to have like, okay, maybe I should be sensitive to my own feelings of worry about this, and not just push through and do something dumb and, you know, end up hurting myself, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see it more now. He's taking more ownership of his feelings and his worries.
Mm.
He recently, I think, had probably a Charlie horse or something in the middle of the night this week, and he was, I don't know if it's a bleed. What if it's a bleed? I think it might be a bleed. And because he hasn't had one in a very long time, so he's like, I forgot what it feels like. What do we do? I'm like, okay, well, first we calm down. Because if it's a bleed, what do we do? He's like, we treat. I go, right, we treat. Okay. Am I nervous because I haven't given you a treatment in over 2 years? We might have more than one stick, buddy. I'm going to be honest with you, but we're going to get through it, and if I can't
Yeah.
do it, we call the nurse, but let's take a minute and breathe, and let's figure out. And now, was my heart going like this? Oh my gosh, he's got to bleed. What are we going to do? Yeah, it was, like it's 11:30 at night. I'm not going to the ER. COVID's back, like this, the whole, the whole thing. I got to go
Right.
to work in the morning, but
Right.
it's the yeah, you control yourself and you say,
Right.
you know what? Let's lay down. Let's put on the boob tube and we're gonna watch a little something. I don't know, whatever cooking show's on. Let's get our mind off of it and let's relax. And then, he came back and he was like, okay, I don't think it's a bleed. It doesn't feel like hot and squishy. I'm like, all right, whatever, it's like, okay, we're on the first step. I'm like, Tylenol it is, and let's put a little ice just in case. And so it is definitely, as he gets older, I'm seeing it come back to me. I'm seeing the
Yes.
reflection in the mirror, and it's very, very satisfying and very heartwarming because, it's very difficult for me to bring it down, take a step back because I'm like,
Yeah.
but he's not, so I have to. And so, I hope that I'm instilling that, and he does know. He'll say, thank you, mommy. I know you were worried, but you took care of it great. I'm like, okay, thanks, bud. you know,
So he's like giving you feedback like, okay, mom, you're doing good. I'm
yeah,
doing good. You're doing good. Okay.
yeah, right. You didn't panic this time. That's a step in the right direction. 1 point for you. Yeah. So, I
That's
feel
so
like,
great though.
as long as he can take care of himself, he can advocate for himself, and he's a good human being, I
Yeah.
think that we're a step in the right direction.
That's
You
so
know?
good. So good, and such a powerful thought, because in you cannot control what happens to any of us from the outside. The only thing that you can control is what happens through us from the inside, right?
Right.
And I
Yep.
just love what you're saying, because it is so true about controlling your own fears, but still being transparent. And some of that has to do with healthy honesty in transparency, like being able to say like if I just hate asparagus, which I don't, I love asparagus. If you saw me, you would understand how much asparagus I've eaten in my life. But I love, but it's like, I love asparagus. But if I hated it, for me to say to my child, like, oh, I hate this, just terrible. Like, it might not be constructive, because maybe their own taste buds haven't developed yet, and they haven't had a chance to try it yet to see how they're going to react to it. And so giving them the exposure and the opportunity to have their form their own decisions. Oh my gosh, that's like way more complicated than what I signed up for when I thought I was going to be a
Yeah.
parent. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't want to go into childhood psychology. I knew that when I was in school. I mean, now here I am, and I have to try to, have these
Yeah.
complexities of thought process about how am I going to shape the future of this person's, decision making process in all of life, and controlling your own emotions where it starts from. But giving them those building blocks, like you said, is something that you can see. I mean, if you can control your own responses, but still be committed to being honest and transparent with them, because I see a lot of parents that do the opposite. I see a lot of parents that are just like, they want their kids to only know the good, so they're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, there's only good, and you're going to be good and everybody's good and there's no pain and you're going to be okay and everything's going to be okay. And it's not. Even
No.
within themselves, it's not as a parent. And so I find that the parents who typically are a little bit more honest, but they do it in a healthy way where they can be
Right.
transparent and they're not displacing responsibility of the emotions on the child, but they are still they're letting the child into the window of, hey, I'm having these thoughts as a parent. Like I love how you said that earlier. Oh my gosh. Like I need to go back to this video and replay that section where you said this of where it's just that like, like mommy's having a little bit of a challenge here. It's okay. Like but I just need to try to process this a little bit. We need to figure it out. Like letting them see that window of transparency in a healthy way is something that I don't think that you will regret as a parent, because like you said, right now you're reaping the results of those little conversations that you
Mhm.
had 1,000 times along the way,
Mhm.
5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yep. No, and I think that it helps the adult too.
Right.
Like you're not alone in in your parent panic. You're like, well, not, and like you said, I'm not displacing it onto my kid. I don't want him to be more panicked, and be upset. It's, you know, we're human. I'm human too. And yeah, it does hurt. I get that it hurts. I'm sorry that it hurts, or you're mad at me. I'm sorry, whatever. But we're gonna get through it. The only real no, Jonathan, is football for me. Nope. There's like a not even like let me think about it. Like there's like a
Amen.
it's like a
I'm
hard
with
no.
you. I'm with you. I'm with you there.
Yeah, but other than that, we'll figure it out. Like, did I want him to go skiing? No, because just like throwing yourself down a mountain doesn't seem safe in any for anyone. But did I go? Yeah, okay, as long as Daddy takes you, it's fine. Like as I'm like gritting my teeth and like waiting on my phone, like um,
Like you end up giving yourself a lip bleed because
yeah,
you got it down.
yeah. You know, so because I don't want him to go to school in college, like end up in college and be like, I can't do anything. I don't want him to
Right.
not try. I don't want him,
Right.
to be scared. So, I want him to live and to the fullest. Like I said, like hemophilia never really was a big, huge like barrier. Like it didn't really, not that it didn't exist in our house. It did. I knew my dad had hemophilia, but he
Right.
still climbed up the tree to chop down the branches. He still was on the roof hanging Christmas lights. He was still doing all the things, riding in doom buggies with no lids and like whatever. Not lids, roofs. But, um, you know, I want him to live like that. I don't want him to be just, I can't do that. But I want
Right.
him to know healthy boundaries as well. Like he can't jump out of that airplane. No
Yeah,
matter
I
how
feel like
much factor you you put on board
right.
before you
Right.
jump out, you're not jumping out of that airplane. Thank you, come again.
Right. No, I agree, and I think that it's important, like, what I hear you saying is that there's balance. You just have to have
Yes.
balance and acknowledge what and be honest with yourself, acknowledge what is real, don't shove it under the rug. That could probably be
Right.
the worst thing you could do for your child
Mhm.
and for yourself.
Yep.
Don't try to hide it in a closet, but at the same time, you gotta live. Like, be
Yeah.
honest, be honest about your fears, your worries. Every 12-step program, out there, you're talking about recovery and all of this thing. It's like all of these 12 steps, but the first step is, just acknowledging where you are. Like you
Right.
cannot move forward unless you acknowledge where you are. And so I love that. I think you've mentioned it a few times is in your process, whether it's you helping your child or you helping yourself, is this idea of like, first I got to say like, okay, I got to be honest with where I am. I'm a little worried about this, but then trying to take a step back, give it some space, give it some breath, give it some time to think and maybe manage, and then say, okay, if there's a crisis, we're going to respond to it. But outside of it being an absolute crisis, we're going to
Right.
just say, let's acknowledge our fears, and then let's see how we can progress through this. Let's see how we can do this together. Let's see how we can live life with hemophilia, not avoid life because of hemophilia,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
That's so
That's
good. Oh my gosh.
perfectly said.
I don't know your dad, but I have to imagine that you got a lot of your sensibility about parenting from your parents, and that you had some things that you learned from them in all of this too. And I just I'm just really inspired every time we have a chance to have a conversation about these things. I have a lot of just admiration for you and the way that you communicate and how you live your life by man, just giving your life away in spite of all the challenges you have at home, and facing fear head on, and just saying, you know what, we're just going to deal with this. We're going to look at it. I don't know if it's the New Jersey spirit or what, but you got this thing, girl. You're like, yeah, let's just do this, and I love it.
Maybe.
It's one of my favorite things about getting to hang out with you is I always feel inspired, and I just appreciate so much you taking time out of your day to have this conversation, because I think there's a lot of people watching today that's probably helped. And one of the things we're getting ready to do is, our Family Education Weekend, you're a big fan of community. I know you have talked about this some, about how important it is for you to connect with other people who are living through the same difficulties and challenges, because you can
Correct.
always learn tips and tricks from other people who are doing it, right? So I know you're a big fan of building community. Is there anything you'd say to anybody who's maybe not sure about this, or that hasn't ever gotten involved in one of these online opportunities, or even their local chapter? I mean, this is something that they need to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Get involved. I mean, smallest thing. It took us a while to get involved in our local chapter. But once we did, it was like, oh, look at all these people. We have so much in common. Coming to the online events. Fortunately, I have not been able to get to one of the in-person events, but on even these online events that Hope's putting on, you guys, it's incredible to just hear the stories of other people, see other people, get to know them. It just really helps bring peace of mind, almost like we're not the only ones, because we are such a small group. You're not just
Right.
running into like 20 people at the grocery store who have hemophilia, like, nobody else that I mean, in the 21 years I've worked here, I've seen a lot of people come and go. I'm the only one that I know of,
Yeah.
so it's rare to find those people out there. And when you do, they're usually pretty golden. Yeah. I think we're a pretty
Yeah.
cool bunch of people. So it's
I
very
agree.
important to get involved, walks, dinners, whatever it is, online
Yeah.
forums, like just get
Yeah.
involved. It's really helpful.
That's so great. Well, I know you have a support group on our Facebook page that you moderate that is talking specifically to help people that are dealing with maybe children that have sensory issues, learning disabilities, other things from a professional point of view, but also your perspective of living with hemophilia. So I know
Yeah.
people can reach out to you there. But, if you'd like to be able to get connected with Kate, you can always email us at events@hope-charities.org, and we'll be happy to put you in touch. But Kate, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Thank you for your time
Thank
today. Thank
you.
you for your willingness to be able to share your story and get the word out. Cause I do think that I've already taken some notes about parenting and been inspired by your story
Good.
today. So thank you so much for all that you do to help the people that you reach and touch by doing things like this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And you guys too. Awesome, awesome talking to you.
Wonderful. Well, it has been a real treasure and treat to be able to do this today with Kate, and I want to say thank you to her, but also thank you so much to everybody who has gotten involved. Like Kate mentioned earlier today, this event that we have coming up with Family Education Weekend is a great opportunity for you to get plugged in. Come hang out with us. Look, these live Zoom call opportunities, you could do it right from your phone, you could do it from your computer, you could do it from a tablet, you can get your kids involved. Matter of fact, at this coming event, if you haven't heard yet, we are actually doing a Fortnite game night for the kids. So that's going to be a lot of fun. You'll be able to get in. If your kids play Fortnite, it's a great fun game to be able to get on your console and jump in with a bunch of other kids that have hemophilia and learn a little bit more about that. But we're going to just have fun together. So all kinds of activities are going on, but it can all be done remotely from your online access with your computer, tablet, or your phone. And so it's a lot of fun. We want to see you there and get a chance to meet you and learn your story as well. So if you haven't done that already, you can go onto our website at hope-charities.org and you could register for this event. It is a free event. It's going to be a lot of fun. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing giveaways and prizes and all kinds of fun things to do. And if you have questions, you can always email us at events@hope-charities.org. But great big thank you to Kate for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. And get online, go register right now, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.